Well, we want to add the voice now of Howard Buffett, the founder and CEO of the Howard G. Buffett Foundation, which has invested more than $500 million in Ukraine since Russia's invasion. Mr. Buffett, welcome to Bloomberg. You're just back from your 10th visit, I believe, to Ukraine. And we know that the bombing continues. We know it was a violent weekend as Russia continues to lean in this winter. What is life like on the ground?
It's really tough. When I left there January 2nd, Russia had started a real serious bombing campaign, which they've not ended yet. You're seeing more civilians dying, and including children. This is part of the Russian strategy, which is to wear people down, to create fatigue. And of course, that will work to some degree. But there's still an incredible commitment by the Ukrainian people and the soldiers on the front line. They're not giving up. They understand they're fighting for their freedom. They're fighting for their life. They're fighting for democracy, and they know they can't give up.
Well, they may not give up, but there is a question, Howard, as we were just discussing with Cliff, whether or not the U.S. is going to give up on this cause, at least in terms of providing monetary and military funding. What happens in Ukraine if the U.S. has given already all it's going to give?
Well, it may be that the U.S. stops temporarily. And what I mean by that is if Ukraine falls, they'll be on the doorstep of many other European countries. Putin's very clever and he has patience, so it doesn't mean it'll move right away, but at some point he's going to make additional moves. He said he's going to do it. His generals have said he's going to do it. You look at Putin's history, you have to believe he's going to do it. So at that point, NATO will get engaged. For people who say that we can step out of NATO are very unrealistic about our future. I mean, Ukraine is fighting not just the second most powerful military in the world, but they're also fighting really by proxy Iran and North Korea. So Ukraine is fighting three of our largest enemies at this point in time. And if that isn't enough to get our attention and keep our attention, we will do it without choice when they get to Europe's doorstep, and we will be fighting as part of Ukraine. And if we withdraw from Ukraine, we have no allies and no friends in the world when we come to having to fight or deal with another conflict.
Howard, I know you've focused a lot of your work on food insecurity around the globe, and including Ukraine. You can't have one without the other. As we learned in the initial invasion by Russia, the inflation that we saw and the food shortages that other parts of the world experienced. Cliff Kupchan just spelled out great worries about what could take place in the Black Sea. And I wonder how concerned you are, how real the threat is against the food supply chain in Ukraine were that to happen.
Well, it's been, significantly affected now. I mean, I would say that, Ukraine is down by 50% of their production. They have 20% of their country, almost 20% of their country occupied by Russia, which has a large part of their agricultural production areas. And so I don't know how much worse it gets. But if they escalate, if Russia escalates in the Black Sea, it's hard to tell what happens. But it all comes down to how the U.S. responds and Europe responds. And I think, if you start listening to, Hungary's an outlier, but if you start listening to the other foreign ministers and prime ministers in most European countries, they understand how serious this is and how significant it can be for them. And they need the United States as an ally, and we're going to need them in the future. So we are in this one way or the other.
Well, something you hear often, Howard, in Congress from those who are more hesitant or resistant to the idea of providing further aid to Ukraine is this idea of accountability, of making sure the funds are used appropriately as intended. In your work there, including with the funds you are providing, have you seen evidence that perhaps there is misuse happening?
No, and a lot of people like to use that argument, and there's been almost no credible proof of how it's been misused. Of course, in a war, you're always going to have some things get used, inappropriately. But, the most important thing, and this narrative just never gets repeated, is, if you go back to Blinken's December 20th, I think it was, press conference just, not even a month ago, he made the point that 90% of all of the military assistance we're providing is in the United States. What we're doing is supporting thousands of jobs across 31 states in this country in the defense industry. And so none of that money is misappropriated. It's all here in the United States. Some money is going, of course, for other purposes. But I can tell you that the people that we deal with, the ministers we deal with, they are stand-up people. They are trying to do the best job that they can do in an incredibly difficult situation. I trust the Ukrainian people. Is there a problem with corruption? Of course there's a problem with corruption in the country, and the president's doing his best to address it at a very difficult time. So I have confidence that the support that the United States gives to Ukraine, the far majority, almost all of it, is going where it's supposed to go and doing what it's supposed to do. You can't have 100% when you're fighting a war. It's not going to be perfect.
The people of Iowa are going to start voting a week from today, Howard, as we begin the process of selecting a Republican nominee. A lot of folks think already that will be Donald Trump. What would that mean for this entire conversation moving forward?
Well, it's a little concerning if he does everything that he says he's going to do. I mean, he says he can end the war in 24 hours. I'm not sure, he's never defined what that means, and it can mean different things. But I don't know how you end the war in 24 hours and have Ukraine come out in a very good position. He has talked about withdrawing from NATO. Sometimes a lot of politicians say things that they aren't going to do, so I can't judge that. But if we withdraw from NATO, we'll have some significant issues in the near future when we need allies and we need friends. We won't have any. So I think, I would defer to see what he actually does do, because, actions speak louder than words. But it's a concern in terms of Ukraine.
All right, Howard, we have to leave it there. But thank you so much for joining us this evening. That's Howard Buffett of the Howard Buffett Foundation.